When a high-powered corporate executive falls from a tree and into the arms of her blue-collar neighbor, she expects embarrassment. What she doesn't expect is that he'll refuse her money, challenge her walls, and quietly dismantle every defense she's spent a lifetime building. This is the story of Lena Brooks, a woman who controlled boardrooms but couldn't control her heart, and Daniel Harper, the single dad who caught her when she fell and never let power define their story. Stay until the end, hit that like button, and comment what city you're watching from so I can see how far this story travels. The first thing Lena Brooks noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable kind that settles over a Saturday afternoon in the suburbs where lawnmowers hum in the distance and children's laughter drifts through open windows. This was different. This was the kind of silence that arrives when something has gone catastrophically wrong, and the universe holds its breath, waiting to see what happens next. Lena was 42 feet above the ground, wedged between two thick branches of the enormous oak tree that dominated the property line between her pristine colonial home and the weathered craftsman next door. One of her Louboutin heels, the nude patent leather pair she'd worn to close the Brennan merger just 3 days ago, dangled from her left foot by sheer will and a single strap. The other had fallen minutes earlier, landing with an anticlimactic thud in the thick carpet of autumn leaves below. Her tailored cream blazer, part of a $1,000 ensemble that had made her feel invincible during this morning's conference call with the Tokyo office, now bore a long tear along the right shoulder. Her carefully styled honey blonde hair had escaped its low chignon and hung in disheveled waves around her face. Her manicured hands, still perfectly polished in ballet slippers pink, gripped the rough bark with a desperation that would have horrified her if anyone from Meridian Financial could see her now. But no one from Meridian Financial was here. No one at all was here, except for the squirrel that had started this entire disaster, chittering somewhere above her head with what sounded distinctly like mockery. Lena had been retrieving a report, just a simple quarterly analysis that had blown off her patio table during a gust of wind and lodged itself in the lower branches of the oak. It should have been a 30-second task. Reach up, grab the paper, return to her home office where 3 monitors and a French press of cooling coffee awaited. She'd kicked off her heels, thinking bare feet would provide better grip on the lowest branch. That had been her first mistake. The second had been underestimating the height. The third had been that damn squirrel launching itself from a branch directly at her face when she'd finally retrieved the report, causing her to flinch, grab wildly, and end up climbing higher instead of retreating downward. Now the report was gone again, probably decorating someone's lawn 3 blocks away. And Lena was discovering that her yoga classes and executive gym membership had not in fact prepared her for scaling ancient trees. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, trying to shift her weight without looking down. "You run a department of 47 people. You've negotiated multi-million-dollar deals. You can climb down a tree." But when she looked down, despite telling herself not to, the ground seemed impossibly far away, and her arms began to tremble. That's when she heard it. The sound that would change everything, though she didn't know it yet. The smooth, rhythmic whisper of sandpaper against wood. The sound stopped. Lena's breath caught. Someone was there. Someone was in the yard. For a wild moment, she considered staying absolutely still, hoping whoever it was would simply leave without noticing the expensively dressed woman trapped in the tree, like some kind of corporate Rapunzel. "You planning to stay up there all day?" The voice was male, calm, tinged with something that might have been amusement but wasn't quite. It drifted up from directly below her, unhurried and matter-of-fact, as if finding neighbors in trees was a regular occurrence. Lena closed her eyes. Of all the people to witness this humiliation, it had to be him. Daniel Harper, the neighbor she'd actively avoided for the 3 years since she'd moved into the neighborhood. Not because he'd done anything wrong, quite the opposite. He was perfectly pleasant during their rare interactions, always nodding politely when they collected their mail at the same time, raising a hand in acknowledgement when their cars passed on the street. No, Lena avoided Daniel Harper because he represented everything her carefully constructed life was designed to keep at arm's length. He was mess and complications, a widower raising a child alone, a carpenter who worked with his hands and drove a 15-year-old pickup truck with paint-stained wheel wells. Someone whose life had been touched by tragedy and loss. The kind of authentic human experience that Lena had spent 2 decades insulating herself against. She'd built her world on control, predictability, and emotional distance. Daniel Harper, with his sad eyes and quiet competence, threatened all of that simply by existing too close to her property line. "I'm fine," Lena called down, trying to inject authority into her voice despite the fact that she was currently hugging a tree branch like a terrified cat. "Just getting some air. 40 feet up? I like heights." "Uh-huh." There was a pause. "Your heel's down here. The expensive-looking one." Lena's jaw tightened. "I know where my heel is, thank you." "Just thought you'd want to know it's safe. Landed in the leaves." Another pause. Lena could hear him moving, footsteps crunching in the fallen foliage. She risked a glance downward and immediately regretted it. Daniel stood directly beneath the oak, one hand shading his eyes as he looked up at her. He wore faded jeans covered in sawdust and a dark blue Henley with the sleeves pushed up to his elbows. His brown hair was slightly too long, curling at his collar, and his face, kind, weathered, maybe 40 years old, bore an expression of patient concern. "I'm calling this in as a rescue situation if you're not down in 5 minutes," he said, and this time she definitely heard amusement. "Fire department loves these calls. They'll bring the whole truck. Probably the news crew too, if it's a slow day." "Don't you dare." The words came out sharper than she intended, panic threading through them. The last thing she needed was photos of Lena Brooks, VP of Acquisitions at Meridian Financial, being rescued from a tree by firefighters. The office would never let her live it down. Worse, it would undermine every careful inch of professional authority she'd spent years building. "Then come down." "I'm aware that's the goal." "What's stopping you?" Lena felt heat rise in her cheeks, embarrassment, frustration, and something else she didn't want to name. Fear. Not of falling, exactly, but of failing, of needing help, of being seen as less than completely capable. "The branches are slippery," she said finally, "and farther apart than they looked going up." "They usually are." Daniel moved closer to the trunk, tilting his head as he examined the tree's structure. "Okay, listen. See that thick branch about 2 feet to your left? The one that looks like it's pointing toward your house?" Lena looked. She did see it. A sturdy limb, maybe 6 inches in diameter. "Yes. That's your path down. It'll take you to the fork about 10 feet below you, and from there you can reach the lowest branch." "I can see the route. That's not the problem." "Then what is?" She wanted to say nothing, wanted to conjure the same ice-cold composure that served her so well in boardroom battles and contract negotiations. But 40 feet above the ground, clinging to a tree, in her stockings with her hair in her face and her shoulder burning from the tear in her jacket, Lena Brooks found herself saying the truth. "I'm afraid I'll fall." The words hung in the air between them. Lena waited for what usually came next in her experience with men: dismissal, mockery, or worse, that particular brand of condescending reassurance that made her feel even smaller. Daniel did none of those things. "You probably will," he said simply. "Branches are tricky when you're not used to them. Weight distribution matters, so does grip." Lena blinked. "That's supposed to be encouraging?" "I'm not here to blow sunshine. I'm here to catch you." Something in the way he said it, straightforward, unadorned, like a carpenter stating a measurement, made Lena's breath catch. She looked down at him again, this time really looking. Daniel had moved directly beneath her, positioning himself in the space where she'd most likely fall if she lost her grip. His feet were planted wide, shoulders back, arms loose at his sides, ready. "You can't possibly catch someone falling from this height," Lena said. "Physics doesn't work that way." "Depends on how you fall. If you panic and flail, yeah, we're both going to have a bad time. But if you trust the process, trust me, I can control the landing." "You're serious." "Dead serious. I've caught heavier things from higher up. Built a life on it, actually." He paused. "But here's the thing, Lena. You have to let go." The sound of her name in his voice startled her. She hadn't realized he knew it. They'd never properly introduced themselves, had they? But of course he knew. Small neighborhood, shared mail carrier, 3 years of proximity. Still, hearing it felt strangely intimate. "Let go and fall." Lena tried to make it sound sarcastic, but her voice wavered. "Let go and trust. There's a difference." Lena's hands tightened on the branch. Everything in her DNA, every instinct that had propelled her from a middle-class childhood to the executive floor, screamed against this idea. She didn't let go. She didn't trust strangers to catch her. She certainly didn't surrender control to blue-collar neighbors she barely knew. But her arms were shaking now, badly enough that she could feel her grip weakening whether she wanted it to or not. Gravity, it seemed, was patient but persistent. What if you miss? The question came out smaller than she intended. I won't. You can't guarantee that. You're right, I can't. But I can tell you that in 20 years of construction and carpentry, I've never dropped anything I promised to catch. Not once. Not materials, not tools, and sure as hell not people. He shifted his stance slightly, adjusting his position. I've got you, Lena. You just have to believe it. She didn't. Not really. How could she? Trust wasn't something Lena did easily, if at all. It required vulnerability. And vulnerability was weakness, and weakness was unacceptable. This was a woman who kept 3 separate emergency plans for every business scenario, who'd negotiated her own divorce settlement without showing a single tear, who'd built a fortress around her heart so sturdy that even her own family struggled to find the entrance. But gravity didn't care about her emotional infrastructure, and Daniel Harper wasn't moving. Talk me through it, Lena said finally. The fall. Not a fall, a controlled descent. His voice remained steady, almost hypnotic in its calmness. You're going to shift your weight to your left foot, the one that still has a shoe, yeah? Then reach for that branch I showed you. Don't grab it. Just touch it first, test the strength. Lena did as he instructed, moving incrementally, her heart hammering against her ribs. The branch felt solid under her palm. Good. Now I need you to swing your right leg over so you're straddling it. Take your time. This is insane. Probably. Do it anyway. And somehow, impossibly, Lena did. She swung her leg over the branch with none of the grace she usually brought to her yoga poses, but she made it. Her remaining heel caught on the bark and went flying, but she barely noticed. She was focused entirely on the sound of Daniel's voice below, guiding her. Perfect. Now you're going to lower yourself so you're hanging from that branch. Let your body be dead weight. Dead weight, Lena repeated, hysteria tickling the edge of her voice. Poor choice of words. Let yourself hang naturally. Don't fight it. She closed her eyes and did it, feeling the rough bark scrape her palms as she transitioned from straddling the branch to dangling beneath it. Her arms screamed in protest, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she might not be able to hold on. I can't. You can. You are. Now listen carefully, Lena. This is the important part. Daniel's voice was closer now, directly below her. You're about 12 feet up. When I say the word, you're going to let go. Not jump, not push off, just release. Your body will fall straight down, and I will catch you. Do you understand? This is crazy. Is that a yes? I can't. Look at me. Lena opened her eyes and looked down. Daniel stood with his arms raised, positioned to catch her the way she'd seen fathers catch children in parks. His expression was utterly calm, absolutely certain. In that moment, he didn't look like a struggling single dad with sawdust in his hair. He looked like someone who'd never broken a promise in his life. Gravity's winning anyway, he said gently. Might as well choose how you land. And there it was, the truth Lena had been avoiding. Her arms were done. She could feel her fingers starting to slip no matter how hard she tried to hold on. The question wasn't whether she'd fall. It was whether she'd fall alone or let someone catch her. On 3, her voice came out as a whisper. On 3, 1. Wait. What? If this kills us both, I'm sorry. Something flickered in Daniel's eyes, surprise maybe, or something softer. Noted. Now, 1, 2. Lena didn't wait for 3. She let go. The sensation of falling was nothing like she'd imagined. There was no slow-motion movie moment, no life flashing before her eyes. Just a split second of weightlessness, of absolute surrender, and then impact. But not with the ground. With Daniel. He caught her exactly as he'd promised, his arms absorbing the force of her fall with a controlled bend of his knees. For a moment they both staggered. Lena wasn't a small woman, and physics still applied. But Daniel kept his footing, kept his arms secure around her, and then they were still. Lena was aware of several things simultaneously: the rapid thunder of her heartbeat, the sawdust smell of Daniel's shirt, the strength of the arms holding her, the fact that her face was pressed against his chest, and his heart was beating just as fast as hers. She was also aware that she should pull away, should reclaim her dignity, should immediately rebuild the professional distance that had just been obliterated. She didn't move. "You okay?" Daniel's voice rumbled through his chest, vibrating against her ear. "I think so." Lena's hands were fisted in his shirt without her permission. "Are you?" "I've caught worse." But she could hear the slight strain in his voice, the effort it had taken to hold her weight, to keep them both upright. "You want to stand up, or should I just carry you inside like some kind of dramatic rescue scene?" That broke the spell. Lena pulled back, heat flooding her face as the full absurdity of the situation crashed over her. "I can stand." But when Daniel lowered her feet to the ground and released her, Lena's legs had other ideas. They buckled immediately, adrenaline and muscle fatigue conspiring to betray her. Daniel caught her again, just her elbow this time, steadying her with an ease that suggested he was used to dealing with unstable things. "Easy, your body's still processing what just happened. Give it a minute." Lena looked up at him, really meeting his eyes for the first time. They were gray, she realized. Gray with flecks of blue, crinkled at the corners from sun and age, and maybe laughter, though she'd never seen him smile much. Kind eyes, patient eyes. The kind of eyes that looked at a woman stuck in a tree and saw a problem to solve rather than a source of entertainment. "Thank you," she said, and was horrified to hear her voice crack slightly. Thank you." "Don't mention it." Daniel released her elbow once she seemed stable, taking a respectful step back. "Everyone gets stuck sometimes. Nothing to be embarrassed about." But Lena was embarrassed. Mortified, actually. She was standing in her neighbor's yard in torn stockings and a ripped jacket, shoeless and disheveled, having just been caught, literally caught, by a man she'd spent 3 years avoiding. This wasn't how Lena Brooks presented herself to the world. This wasn't who she was. Except apparently it was. At least today. She gestured vaguely toward her house, then realized she was still clutching Daniel's shirt. She released it immediately, smoothing down the wrinkled fabric in a useless gesture. "I should go, and you probably have work to—" "I interrupted your—" "Just sanding cabinets. They'll wait." Daniel bent down and retrieved her heels from the leaves, brushing them off before offering them to her. "Here, though you might want to skip wearing these for tree climbing in the future." Lena took the shoes, unable to meet his eyes. "Right. Yes. Good advice." An awkward silence descended, broken only by the chittering of the squirrel, still in the tree, still judging. Lena wanted to flee, to retreat to her house and pretend this had never happened. But something made her pause, some small kernel of decency that insisted she acknowledge what had just occurred. "You really did catch me," she said quietly. "I said I would." Most people say a lot of things they don't mean. Daniel tilted his head slightly, studying her with those patient gray eyes. "I'm not most people." It should have sounded arrogant. It didn't. It sounded like simple fact, delivered without ego or expectation. And something about that, about his complete lack of performance or posturing, made Lena's carefully constructed walls tremble just slightly. "No," she said softly. "I don't think you are." Before she could analyze what she meant by that, a voice called out from Daniel's backyard. "Dad, did you see a shoe fly over the fence? I heard something." A child. His daughter, Lena remembered vaguely. She'd seen the girl a few times, always at a distance, maybe 11 or 12 years old, dark hair like her father's, usually reading under the same oak tree that had just betrayed Lena so spectacularly. Daniel's entire demeanor shifted at the sound of the child's voice, a softness entering his expression that made him look younger. "Yeah, Em. Just help the neighbor with something. Be there in a second." "Okay." The voice retreated and Daniel looked back at Lena apologetically. "I should go." "Of course." Lena took another step backward, clutching her ruined shoes like a lifeline. And thank you again. Really, I won't forget this. Probably hard to forget falling out of a tree. I didn't fall. I descended in a controlled manner. That earned her something that might have been a smile, just the barest quirk of his lips, gone before she could be certain. Right. Controlled descent. My mistake. Lena turned toward her house, then paused. Something in her, pride maybe, or the habitual instinct to keep her ledgers balanced, made her turn back. I should pay you. For your time, the rescue, whatever the going rate is for, no. The word was gentle but absolute, final. Lena blinked. I'm sorry? I don't want your money, Lena. But I interrupted your work, your Saturday. The least you can do is go inside, make yourself some tea, and stop thinking everything requires payment. Daniel was already turning back toward his workshop, his voice drifting over his shoulder. I helped because you needed help. That's all there is to it. And then he was gone, disappearing around the corner of his house before Lena could formulate a response. She stood there in the leaves, holding her expensive shoes, feeling something uncomfortable and unfamiliar stirring in her chest. She'd spent her entire adult life in a world where everything had a price. Every favor, every gesture, every relationship was a transaction, carefully negotiated, properly compensated, with clear terms and cleaner exits. She knew how to navigate that world. She understood it. But Daniel Harper had just offered something that didn't fit into any spreadsheet or contract. He'd offered help without expectation, safety without strings. And he'd refused payment, which somehow felt more intimate than if he'd caught her naked instead of just disheveled. Lena walked back to her house slowly, her feet leaving dark prints in the morning dew. Inside, her home office waited, monitors dark now, coffee cold, the quarterly reports that had started this entire disaster probably decorating someone's hedge 3 blocks away. She should call the office, update the Tokyo numbers, review the Brennan merger documents that had come through overnight. Instead, she stood in her kitchen and made tea. Earl Grey, steeped for exactly 4 minutes, no sugar. She carried it to her window, the one that overlooked the property line and the massive oak tree, and watched as Daniel returned to his workshop. Through the open door, she could see him return to his sanding, the same smooth, patient rhythm she'd heard before. His daughter appeared briefly, bringing him what looked like a sandwich, and he paused to ruffle her hair, to say something that made her laugh. A normal Saturday. A simple life. Nothing like Lena's world of conference calls and corporate battles. And yet Daniel Harper had possessed something in that moment under the tree that Lena, with all her power and money and carefully maintained control, hadn't been able to manufacture. Certainty. Absolute, unshakable certainty in his own capability. Not arrogance, certainty. The kind that came from knowing exactly who you were and what you could do without needing anyone's approval or validation. Lena had spent 20 years chasing that feeling in boardrooms and corner offices. Daniel had it while wearing sawdust and catching falling executives on a Saturday morning. She sipped her tea and watched him work until the angle of the sun changed and she could no longer see into his workshop. Then she finally turned back to her computers, to her reports, to the carefully constructed life that suddenly felt just a little bit smaller than it had this morning. But as she worked, Lena found her eyes drifting back to that window, back to the oak tree, back to the spot where Daniel Harper had stood and promised to catch her. And the thing that scared her most wasn't that she'd fallen. It was that for one breathless second in his arms, Lena Brooks had felt safe enough to trust. The envelope arrived on Monday morning, slipped under Daniel's front door while he was making breakfast for Emma. He found it when he went to grab the newspaper, cream-colored paper, expensive stock, his name written in precise cursive across the front. No address, which meant Lena had delivered it herself. Daniel knew what it was before he opened it. Inside, crisp and new, were 5 $100 bills and a note on matching stationery. For your time Saturday, professional courtesy, LB. He stood in his doorway, the envelope in one hand and a spatula in the other, and felt something between amusement and disappointment settle in his chest. Of course she'd done this. Of course Lena Brooks couldn't simply accept help without converting it into a transaction. That would require acknowledging that someone had given her something without expecting payment, and in her world, that probably didn't exist. Dad, the eggs are smoking. Daniel turned back inside, tucked the envelope into his back pocket, and rescued breakfast before it became charcoal. Emma sat at the kitchen table, already dressed for school in jeans and her favorite hoodie, the navy one with constellations printed on it that she'd worn so often the stars were starting to fade. She had a book propped against her orange juice glass, completely absorbed, her dark hair falling forward to hide her face. She looked so much like Sarah in moments like these that it still caught Daniel off guard sometimes, even 4 years after the accident. The same intense focus, the same ability to disappear into whatever captured her attention. But Emma had Daniel's stubborn chin and his practical nature, which meant she also looked up when he set her plate down and immediately noticed his expression. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. You have your thinking face on." "I have a thinking face?" "Yeah, your eyebrows do this thing." Emma demonstrated, scrunching her face up in exaggerated concentration. "Like you're trying to solve a puzzle, but the pieces don't fit right." Daniel slid into the chair across from her, fighting a smile. "Eat your breakfast, smarty pants." "Is it about the tree lady?" His fork paused halfway to his mouth. "The tree lady? The neighbor who fell. I heard you telling Uncle Mike about it yesterday." Emma took a bite of toast, utterly casual. "He said you should ask her out. You said that was the dumbest thing you'd ever heard. Then he said you needed to get back out there. Then you hung up on him. You were eavesdropping. You were talking loud. There's a difference." She peered at him over her book. "So are you going to ask her out?" "No." "Why not? Is she mean?" "No, she's not mean. She's just—" Daniel searched for the right word. "Complicated." "Everyone's complicated, Dad. That's not a real reason. She's also our neighbor, Em. We have to live next to her. Dating neighbors is messy." "Messier than catching them when they fall out of trees?" Daniel pointed his fork at her. "That's enough wisdom from the peanut gallery. Finish eating or you'll miss the bus." Emma grinned, recognizing victory, and returned to her book. But as Daniel ate his own breakfast, he thought about the envelope in his pocket and what it represented. Lena had taken something simple, one person helping another, and tried to sanitize it, reduce it to a business transaction. She probably thought she was being polite, professional. Maybe she even thought she was protecting herself from feeling indebted. What she didn't understand was that the money made it worse, not better. It suggested that everything had a price, even basic human decency. And Daniel, who'd spent 4 years learning to navigate single fatherhood on a carpenter's income, who'd held his wife's hand as she died and promised to take care of their daughter, who understood that the most important things in life couldn't be bought or sold, he wasn't going to let that stand. After he dropped Emma at the bus stop, Daniel spent 20 minutes in his workshop thinking. Then he pulled out a piece of oak from his scrap pile, a beautiful piece, quarter sawn, with tiger stripes running through the grain. He'd been saving it for something special, though he hadn't known what yet. Now he did. He worked through the morning, the familiar rhythm of measuring and cutting and sanding calming his thoughts. By noon, he had what he wanted. A simple wooden bookmark, about 6 inches long and 2 inches wide, sanded smooth as silk and finished with Danish oil that brought out the wood's natural beauty. On one side, he'd carved a simple design, an oak tree, stylized but recognizable, its branches reaching upward. On the other side, he burned 4 words with his woodworking pen. Not everything costs money. Daniel walked next door just after 1 o'clock, fairly certain Lena would be home. Her car, a sleek black Mercedes that probably cost more than he made in a year, sat in the driveway, and he could see lights on in what he assumed was her home office. He rang the doorbell and waited, the bookmark in one hand and her envelope in the other. Lena answered the door in business casual, tailored black pants and a silk blouse the color of seafoam, her hair pulled back in that same severe style she'd worn every time he'd seen her. Except now he knew what it looked like, loose and wild, tangled from wind and panic. The image didn't quite fit with the polished woman standing before him. "Daniel." She looked surprised, though she hid it quickly. "Is something wrong?" "Depends on your perspective." He held out the envelope. "This was under my door this morning." Lena's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Uncertainty, maybe. "Yes, I wanted to properly compensate you for Saturday." "I don't want your money, Lena." You said that already. I'm saying you should take it anyway. She crossed her arms and Daniel recognized the posture. Defensive, closed off, ready for a fight. $500 for an hour of your time is more than fair. If anything, it's probably less than what a professional rescue would have cost. I'm not a professional rescue service. I'm your neighbor who helped you out of a tree. Exactly. And neighbors should be compensated when they provide services. Is that how it works in your world? Everything's a service? Yes. The word came out sharp, certain. That's exactly how it works. Everyone wants something, Daniel. Everyone has an angle. At least with money, the transaction is clean. No confusion, no complicated feelings, no debt. Daniel studied her, seeing past the armor to the woman underneath. She believed what she was saying. She genuinely thought this was the right thing to do, the safe thing. And that was sadder than if she'd been deliberately insulting. I don't have an angle, he said quietly. I helped you because you needed help. Because it was the right thing to do. Because we're neighbors, and that's what neighbors do. There's no debt, Lena. There's no complicated feelings. There's just one person catching another person when they fall. Nothing is that simple. Some things are. They stood there in her doorway at an impasse. Finally, Lena sighed, and for just a moment she looked tired. Not physically tired, though there were shadows under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept well, but tired in a deeper way. Tired of fighting, maybe, or tired of whatever battle she'd been waging long before she'd climbed that tree. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. I don't know how to just accept help without reciprocating. Then learn. Daniel held out the bookmark. Here, trade you. Lena took it automatically, her fingers running over the smooth wood. She turned it over, read the words he'd carved, and something in her expression shifted, softened. You made this. This morning, oak from the same tree that got you into trouble. Seemed fitting. It's beautiful. It's a bookmark, not exactly $500 worth of craftsmanship. It's worth more than that. The words slipped out before she could stop them, and Lena looked almost surprised by her own honesty. She clutched the bookmark tighter, her carefully maintained composure cracking just slightly. You didn't have to do this. I know. I wanted to. Daniel tucked the envelope back into his pocket. I'm returning this. You can throw it away, donate it, do whatever you want with it, but I'm not taking payment for helping you. That's not how I operate. Everyone operates that way. Not everyone. He turned to leave, then paused. And Lena? The world's not as transactional as you think it is. Most people are just trying to get through their days without falling out of trees. Sometimes they need a hand. Sometimes they are the hand. It evens out. He was halfway down her front walk when she called after him. Daniel? He turned back. Lena stood in her doorway, silhouetted against the expensive interior of her home, holding the wooden bookmark like it was something precious and fragile. Thank you, she said, for the bookmark, and for not taking the money. You're welcome. I still think you're wrong about people. Maybe I am, or maybe you've just been dealing with the wrong people. Daniel walked back to his workshop, leaving Lena standing in her doorway with $500 she couldn't spend and a bookmark that had cost him nothing but time and care. He didn't look back, didn't second-guess the gesture. He simply returned to his cabinets, to the familiar smell of sawdust and wood oil, and got back to work. What he didn't see was Lena closing her door slowly, or the way she carried the bookmark to her office and set it on her desk where she could see it. He didn't see her pick it up 3 times over the next hour, running her fingers over the carved oak tree, reading the words again and again, as if they were written in a language she was only beginning to understand. And he definitely didn't see her slip the $500 into an envelope addressed to the local children's shelter, anonymous donor, mailed that same afternoon. 2 weeks passed. Daniel saw Lena in passing, collecting mail, leaving for work in the early morning darkness, returning late with takeout containers and her laptop bag. They waved. She smiled, a small thing, but genuine. He noticed she'd started parking her car at a slightly different angle, which gave him a clearer path when he backed out of his own driveway. A small gesture, probably unconscious, but it spoke of awareness, of consideration. Then came the letter from the HOA. Daniel found it in his mailbox on a Thursday, sandwiched between a bill from the electric company and a coupon circular. The envelope bore the official HOA seal. Madison Park Homeowners Association, established 1987, and had the aggressive formality that only bureaucratic organizations could achieve. He opened it while walking back to his house, Emma trailing behind him with her backpack. "Dad, can Mia come over tomorrow? We have a science project," and her mom said, "Hold that thought, Em." Daniel stopped walking, reading the letter twice to make sure he understood it correctly. Then he read it a third time, feeling anger build slowly in his chest like water behind a dam. "Dad, what's wrong?" "Nothing, sweetheart. Yeah, Mia can come over. Just ask her to bring her notes." But it wasn't nothing. The letter was addressed to residents at 412 and 414 Maple Drive. His address and Lena's. The massive oak tree that straddled their property line, the one that had been there longer than the neighborhood itself, was apparently in violation of HOA Code 7.3.2, trees exceeding 40 feet in height within 15 feet of property structures. The letter demanded the tree be trimmed to below 35 feet within 60 days or face fines starting at $500 per week, escalating to potential legal action and forced compliance. It was signed by Martin Westwood, HOA president, and countersigned by 3 board members Daniel vaguely recognized from neighborhood meetings he rarely attended. "This is ridiculous," Daniel muttered. "What is?" Emma had given up on getting his full attention and was now trying to read the letter over his arm. "HOA nonsense, nothing for you to worry about." But it was something to worry about, and Daniel knew it. That tree was magnificent, a white oak, probably 150 years old, with a trunk diameter of nearly 4 feet. It provided shade to both properties, habitat for countless birds and squirrels, and had survived storms and seasons long before this neighborhood existed. Trimming it to 35 feet would effectively kill it, destroying its natural structure and likely causing it to die within a few years. It was also, Daniel suspected, not actually about the tree. He'd lived in this neighborhood long enough to understand the HOA dynamics. Martin Westwood was a retired real estate developer who treated the neighborhood association like his personal fiefdom. He didn't like things he couldn't control, and he especially didn't like residents who didn't bow to his authority. Sarah had clashed with him years ago over playground equipment, and Daniel had largely avoided him since. But Lena was new, wealthy, and notably absent from HOA meetings and social functions. She was exactly the kind of resident Martin would target, someone who could afford the fines but whose absence suggested she didn't care about community standards. Daniel looked at his house, then at Lena's. Through her office window, he could see her at her desk, probably on a call, gesturing as she spoke. She had no idea what was coming. He made dinner, helped Emma with her homework, and waited until after she'd gone to bed before walking next door. It was nearly 9 o'clock, later than he'd normally disturb a neighbor, but Lena's office light was still on. He rang the doorbell and waited. Lena answered in yoga pants and an oversized sweater, her hair down and slightly damp, glasses perched on her nose. It was the most casual he'd ever seen her, and for a moment Daniel forgot why he'd come. "Daniel?" She looked surprised and maybe slightly concerned. "Is everything okay? Is Emma—" "Emma's fine. Sorry, I should have led with that." He held up the letter. "Did you get one of these today?" Lena's expression shifted from concern to confusion. "One of what?" "HOA letter. About the oak tree." "I don't—" "Hold on." She disappeared into her house, returning a moment later with her own mail, still unopened. She flipped through it, found the matching envelope, and tore it open. Daniel watched her face as she read, seeing the confusion turn to disbelief, then to anger. "This is absurd," she said flatly. "The tree was here when I bought the house. It's grandfathered in." "You'd think so." "No, I know so. I had a property survey done during closing. That tree is documented as a heritage oak, which means it's protected under county ordinances." She read the letter again, her jaw tightening. "This is harassment." "Probably. Martin Westwood, the HOA president, he's got a history of this kind of thing. He targets residents he doesn't like and hits them with code violations until they either fall in line or move. And he doesn't like me because Because you're successful, you don't come to his meetings, and you probably make more in a month than he made in his best year. Daniel shrugged. Some people can't handle that. Lena looked at him sharply. You think this is about me? I think this is about control, and you represent everything Martin can't control. He gestured at her house, the pristine landscaping, the expensive car, the subtle indicators of wealth that Madison Park aspired to but rarely achieved. You're what this neighborhood wants to be. That threatens him. So he's going after a tree. He's going after you. The tree is just leverage. For a moment, Lena said nothing. She stood in her doorway, the letter clenched in one hand, and Daniel could practically see her mind working through the problem. This was her element: obstacles, strategy, battles to be won. But he could also see the weariness beneath the anger, the weight of one more fight she hadn't asked for. I'll handle it, she said finally. I'll call my lawyer tomorrow, get the property survey sent to the HOA, cite the county ordinances. This will be resolved in a week. Maybe, Daniel said. Or maybe Martin will find another code to throw at you, then another. He's persistent. So am I. I don't doubt that. Daniel hesitated, weighing his next words. But you don't have to fight this alone. It's my tree, too. My property line. I can help. Lena's expression softened slightly, and for a moment Daniel thought she might accept. Then the walls went back up, and she shook her head. I appreciate the offer, but this is exactly the kind of thing I deal with professionally. Corporate bullies, power plays, territorial disputes. I know how to handle men like Martin Westwood. With lawyers and money. It's what I'm good at. I'm sure it is. But this isn't a boardroom, Lena. This is a neighborhood. Different rules apply. Daniel could see he wasn't getting through to her, so he tried a different approach. Look, just keep me in the loop, okay? If you need documentation about the tree or historical records or anything like that, I've been here 8 years. I know people. I know the area. I can help with the grunt work, even if you're handling the legal stuff. Lena studied him, those sharp eyes searching for the angle she was convinced everyone had. Why? Why what? Why do you keep offering to help me? The tree, the bookmark, now this. What do you get out of it? Daniel smiled, but it was tinged with sadness. You really can't imagine someone helping you without wanting something in return, can you? In my experience, no. Then your experience is limited. He turned to leave, then paused. For the record, I help because it's the right thing to do. Because that tree matters to both of us. Because fighting Martin Westwood alone is exhausting, and I've got time and knowledge that might make it easier. That's it. No hidden agenda, no expectation of payment, no complicated feelings. He was back in his own yard when Lena called after him, her voice carrying across the dark lawn. Daniel, do you want coffee tomorrow morning? We could go over the survey documents together, if you have time. It was a small olive branch, tentatively offered. Daniel recognized it for what it was, Lena's way of accepting help without fully surrendering her independence. I've got time, he said. 7:30 work? Emma's bus comes at 7:15. 7:30 is perfect. I'll bring the coffee. You bring the documents. You don't have to bring Lena. He caught her eye across the darkness. I'm bringing the coffee. Let me do this small thing without turning it into a negotiation. She was quiet for a moment. Then, so softly he almost missed it. Okay. Daniel went back inside, checked on Emma one more time, and lay in bed staring at the ceiling. He thought about Lena standing in her doorway, exhausted and defensive and trying so hard to handle everything alone. He thought about the oak tree that connected their properties, about roots that ran deeper than property lines or HOA codes. And he thought about the bookmark he'd carved, sitting somewhere in Lena's expensive house, carrying a message she was only beginning to understand. Not everything costs money. Some things, the important things, couldn't be bought at all. They had to be freely given and freely received, trust traded for trust, help offered without strings attached. Daniel had learned that the hard way, in hospital rooms and funeral homes, in the dark months after Sarah died when neighbors he barely knew brought casseroles and offers to watch Emma and shoulders to cry on. They hadn't wanted payment. They'd wanted to help because that's what humans did for each other when the walls came down and the truth showed through. Lena hadn't learned that yet. But maybe Just maybe she was starting to. Tomorrow morning, they'd drink coffee and review property surveys. They'd make a plan to fight the HOA's ridiculous demand. And maybe, in the process, Lena would discover that accepting help didn't make her weak. It just made her human. Daniel arrived at 7:30 sharp with 2 travel mugs of coffee and a folder tucked under his arm. Lena answered the door wearing another version of her armor, tailored navy slacks and a white button-down, her hair already styled despite the early hour. But she'd skipped the heels, he noticed, wearing simple flats instead. It was a small concession to casualness, and somehow it made her seem more real. "You actually brought coffee," she said, taking the mug he offered. "I said I would. People say a lot of things." But she was smiling slightly as she said it, and Daniel recognized progress when he saw it. Lena's home office was exactly what he'd expected: sleek, modern, meticulously organized. 3 monitors sat on a glass desk, papers arranged in perfect stacks, pens lined up like soldiers. The only personal touch was the wooden bookmark he'd made, positioned carefully next to her keyboard where she could see it. Daniel pretended not to notice, but something warm settled in his chest at the sight. "I pulled the original property survey," Lena said, spreading documents across her desk. "The tree is clearly marked as a heritage specimen, documented in 1994 when the neighborhood was developed. There are specific notations about preserving it." Daniel leaned over the papers, his shoulder nearly brushing hers. "And county ordinances?" "Section 18.4 of the Madison County Tree Preservation Act. Heritage oaks over 100 years old are protected from removal or significant alteration without county approval. The HOA can't supersede county law." "So we've got a solid case." "We have an airtight case." Lena's voice carried absolute certainty, the same tone she probably used in boardrooms. "Martin Westwood is either ignorant of the law or banking on us being too intimidated to fight back. My bet's on the second one. He tried something similar with the Johnsons 3 years ago, claimed their fence violated setback requirements, harassed them for months before they finally moved." Lena's eyes sharpened. "They moved because of HOA harassment?" "They were older, tired of fighting. Martin wore them down." Daniel sipped his coffee, remembering the quiet couple who'd lived 2 houses down, how defeated they'd looked loading the moving truck. "He's patient. He doesn't win by being right. He wins by being relentless." "Then he's never dealt with me." "No," Daniel agreed. "I don't think he has." They spent the next hour building their case: property surveys, county ordinances, historical documents about the neighborhood's development. Lena worked with focused intensity, occasionally firing questions at Daniel about previous HOA disputes, neighborhood history, anything that might give them leverage. He answered what he could, impressed by how quickly she absorbed information and connected dots he hadn't seen. "The HOA meeting is next Tuesday," Lena said, checking her phone. 7 p.m. at the community center. We'll present our case then, publicly, so Martin can't claim we didn't follow proper channels." "You want to do this publicly?" "I want witnesses. I want a record. And I want Martin Westwood to understand that threats don't work on me." She looked up from her documents, and something fierce burned in her expression. People like him count on others being too busy or too scared to push back. "Well, I'm neither." Daniel studied her across the desk, seeing past the corporate warrior to something deeper. "This isn't just about the tree, is it?" Lena's hand stilled on the papers. For a moment, she looked like she might deflect, retreat behind her usual walls. Then she sighed, and when she spoke, her voice was quieter. "I've spent my entire career dealing with men who use power to compensate for inadequacy. Men who see a woman in their space and immediately need to put her back in what they consider her place." She picked up a pen, rolling it between her fingers. "I'm tired of it, and I'm especially tired of it following me home. This neighborhood, this house, it's supposed to be my sanctuary, and now some petty tyrant wants to take that away because I don't bow and scrape at his meetings. So you're making a stand. I'm making sure he knows exactly who he's dealing with." Daniel understood the impulse, but he also understood Martin Westwood. Just be prepared for him to escalate. Men like that, when you challenge them publicly, they double down. "Let him." Lena's jaw set in a way Daniel was beginning to recognize. "I've handled worse." What she didn't say, but what Daniel heard beneath her words, was that she'd always handled things alone. That fighting battles solo was so ingrained in her that accepting his help still felt foreign, uncomfortable, like wearing shoes that didn't quite fit. "Well, you're not handling this one alone," Daniel said. "I'll be at that meeting. We'll present together." "You don't have to, Lena." He waited until she met his eyes. "It's my tree too, my property. I'm involved whether you like it or not. So we can either work together and present a united front, or we can both show up and step on each other's arguments. Which do you prefer?" She stared at him for a long moment, and Daniel could practically see her recalculating, adjusting to the reality that he wasn't going to back down or let her shoulder this alone. "Together," she said finally. "We present together." "Good. Then let's practice." They spent the rest of the morning running through their presentation, Lena playing prosecutor and Daniel adding the human element, stories about the tree's history, its importance to the neighborhood, the wildlife it supported. Emma came home from school and found them still at it, surrounded by papers and half-empty coffee mugs. "Are you guys planning a war or something?" Emma asked, dumping her backpack by the door. "Neighborhood politics," Daniel said, somehow less fun than it sounds. "The HOA is trying to make us cut down the oak tree," Lena added, and Daniel noticed she'd said us without seeming to realize it. "We're preparing to fight back." Emma's eyes went wide. "The oak tree? But that's where the owl nests. And the woodpeckers. You can't cut it down." "We're not planning to. That's why we're fighting." "Can I help?" Lena looked surprised by the offer, but Daniel saw the opportunity. "Actually, yeah. You know that nature journal you've been keeping? The one where you track the birds and animals you see? The one for science class? That's the one. Think you could write down all the species you've seen in the oak tree? Dates, times, anything you remember?" Emma brightened. "Like evidence?" "Exactly like evidence. Environmental impact matters in cases like this." "I'm on it." Emma grabbed her backpack and disappeared upstairs, leaving Daniel and Lena alone again. "That was smart," Lena said quietly, using her observations. "Emma's been documenting that tree for 2 years. She probably knows more about its ecosystem than any environmental study could tell us." Daniel started gathering papers. "Plus, it's good for her to see that fighting for what matters is worth doing." "Is that what you're teaching her? To fight?" "I'm teaching her to stand up. There's a difference." He glanced at Lena. "Sarah, my wife, she was like that. Quiet most of the time, but when something mattered, she'd dig in and not let go. Emma's got that in her." It was the first time Daniel had mentioned Sarah directly, and Lena seemed to sense the significance. "How long has it been?" 4 years last March." "I'm sorry." "Thank you." Daniel collected the last of the papers, straightening them into a neat stack. "It gets easier, but it doesn't get easy. You just learn to carry it differently." Lena was quiet for a moment, then, "I was married once. Briefly. It ended badly." "Recently?" 5 years ago. He wanted a wife who'd give up her career and focus on his instead. I wanted to keep being myself. Turned out those things were incompatible." "His loss." She looked up, surprised. "You don't even know me." "I know you climbed a tree to get a work document. I know you don't back down from fights, even when they're not your battles. I know you make damn good coffee, and you're teaching yourself to accept help, even though it goes against every instinct you have." Daniel smiled. That's enough to know he was an idiot. Color rose in Lena's cheeks, the first time Daniel had seen her actually blush. Thank you. Just stating facts." The week leading up to the HOA meeting passed in a blur of preparation. Daniel and Lena met every evening after Emma went to bed, refining their arguments, anticipating Martin's objections, building a case so solid that even the most biased board member would have trouble dismissing it. And somewhere in those late-night strategy sessions, something shifted between them. Lena started asking Daniel's opinion before making decisions. Daniel started noticing small things, how Lena rubbed her temples when she was tired, how she organized her notes by color coding, the way she'd pause mid-sentence when she was reconsidering a point. They developed a rhythm, a shorthand, finishing each other's thoughts and building on each other's ideas in ways that felt natural, effortless. On Monday night, the evening before the meeting, Lena showed up at Daniel's door with takeout. "I figured you'd be making dinner," she said, holding up bags from the Thai place downtown. Thought I'd save you the trouble. Daniel accepted the food, noting that she'd somehow remembered he'd mentioned liking pad Thai in passing 3 days ago. Emma's going to think you're trying to steal her dad. Emma and I had a conversation this afternoon, actually. She came over to show me her nature journal. Did she now? Very thoroughly documented, complete with sketches. Lena followed him into the kitchen. She also informed me that her dad is a terrible cook, and they eat cereal for dinner at least twice a week. That's an exaggeration. It's only once a week. Maybe. They ate at Daniel's kitchen table, Emma monopolizing Lena's attention with detailed explanations of every bird species she'd observed. Daniel watched them interact, surprised by how natural it seemed. Lena asking genuine questions, Emma responding with her characteristic intensity, neither of them performing or pretending. After Emma went upstairs to finish her homework, Lena helped Daniel clean up, moving around his kitchen like she'd been there before. It should have felt strange. Instead, it felt right in a way Daniel hadn't experienced since Sarah died. I'm nervous about tomorrow, Lena admitted, drying a plate. You? The woman who closes million-dollar deals? That's different. That's my world. I know the rules. I know the players. This is... She set the plate down carefully. This is personal. It matters more than it should. It matters exactly as much as it should, Daniel corrected. That tree's been here longer than any of us. It deserves protecting. It's not just the tree. Lena turned to face him, leaning back against the counter. It's the principle. I moved here thinking I could finally have something stable, something that was mine without strings or complications or people trying to control it. And now Martin Westwood is trying to control it. It's the story of my life. She said it lightly, but Daniel heard the weight beneath the words. He set down the dish he'd been washing and dried his hands. You know what I think? What? I think you've been fighting alone for so long, you've forgotten what it's like to have backup. And that's made you see every conflict as something you have to handle solo, because asking for help feels like admitting weakness. Lena's eyes narrowed. Amateur psychology? Basic observation. You tried to pay me for catching you from a tree, Lena. You turned a simple act of decency into a transaction because that felt safer than acknowledging I did it just to help. Daniel moved closer, not crowding her, but close enough that she had to meet his eyes. Tomorrow, we walk into that meeting together. Not you with me as backup, not me with you providing legal expertise. Together, as a team. Can you do that? I don't know, she said honestly. I've never really been part of a team. Then let's try it, just this once. See how it feels. She studied him for a long moment, and Daniel could see the war happening behind her eyes, the habitual urge to refuse help battling against something newer, more tentative. Trust, maybe. Or at least the willingness to try. Okay, she said finally. Together. The Madison Park Community Center was packed when they arrived Tuesday evening. Daniel had expected a decent turnout, but this was unusual. At least 40 people crammed into a space meant for 25, with more filing in behind them. Martin Westwood sat at the front table with 4 other board members, looking pleased with the crowd. He'd clearly rallied his supporters. He's making an example of us, Lena murmured as they found seats near the front. Let him. We've got facts. He's got bluster. The meeting started with standard HOA business, budget reports, landscaping contracts, complaints about holiday decorations. Martin ran it like a corporate board meeting, his voice carrying authority that demanded deference. Daniel watched Lena observe him, seeing her analytical mind dissecting his tactics, his tells, the way he managed the room. Finally, 40 minutes in, Martin cleared his throat. Next item. Code violation 7.3.2. Tree height exceeding regulations at 412 and 414 Maple Drive. All eyes turned to Daniel and Lena. Several neighbors who'd seemed friendly suddenly looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact. Martin had done his work well. Mr. Harper, Miss Brooks, you received notification of this violation 3 weeks ago. What steps have you taken toward compliance? Daniel started to stand, but Lena touched his arm lightly. Wait. She stood instead, and the room seemed to shift focus, drawn to her presence. Mr. Westwood, members of the board, neighbors, Lena's voice was clear, professional, absolutely controlled. We received your notice, yes. We've also conducted thorough research into the legal standing of that notice, and we've discovered several significant issues with your claim. Martin's expression hardened. The code is clear, Ms. Brooks. Trees over 40 feet within 15 feet of structures are violations. Your tree meets that description. Actually, it doesn't. Lena pulled out the first document. This is the original property survey from 1994 when Madison Park was developed. The white oak in question is specifically marked as a heritage specimen to be preserved. The developer who created this neighborhood agreed to build around that tree, not despite it. That agreement is part of the permanent record. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Martin's jaw tightened. Surveys can be amended. Current codes supersede historical documentation. Not when county law is involved. Daniel stood now, moving beside Lena. Madison County Tree Preservation Act, Section 18.4. Heritage oaks over 100 years old are protected by county ordinance. The HOA can't supersede county law, Mr. Westwood. You know that. The safety of residents supersedes. The tree has been professionally assessed, Lena interrupted smoothly, pulling out another document. I had an arborist inspect it last week. The tree is healthy, structurally sound, and poses no danger to either property. I have the full report here, if you'd like to review it. Martin's face was reddening. That's one opinion. It's a certified professional opinion from a licensed arborist with 20 years of experience. Lena's voice stayed level, but steel ran through it. Unless you have competing professional assessment to present, this report stands as expert testimony that the tree poses no hazard. I'd like to speak. A woman stood in the third row. Mrs. Patterson, Daniel recognized, who'd lived in the neighborhood since before he moved in. I've watched that oak tree for 30 years. It was here before any of our houses. My children climbed it, my grandchildren play under it. It's part of what makes this neighborhood special. Another voice joined in, then another. Neighbors Daniel barely knew stood up to defend the tree, sharing memories and stories. Emma's nature journal made the rounds, her careful documentation of the wildlife ecosystem drawing appreciative murmurs. The tide was turning, and Martin clearly felt it. This is irregular, he said sharply. We have procedures. Then let's follow them, Daniel said. Put it to a vote. Let the neighborhood decide if a 150-year-old heritage oak should be destroyed because of a code that doesn't legally apply to it. Martin's eyes flashed with anger. Mr. Harper, you're out of order. Actually, he's not. One of the other board members, a younger man Daniel didn't know well, spoke up. The HOA bylaws allow for resident petitions on enforcement matters. If there's significant community opposition, we're required to vote. This isn't a matter for popular opinion. With respect, Mr. Westwood, I think it is. The board member looked uncomfortable but resolute. We're supposed to represent the community's interests, not impose arbitrary standards. If the tree is legally protected and professionally assessed as safe, and if the community wants to preserve it, I don't see grounds for enforcement. Daniel felt Lena's hand find his arm again, this time not to stop him, but to steady herself. They were winning. Not because they'd shouted louder or thrown more money at the problem, but because they'd come prepared, presented facts, and let the truth speak for itself. Martin's face had gone from red to purple. This is a dangerous precedent. If we allow exceptions— This isn't an exception, Lena said quietly. It's following the law. Something I'd expect the HOA president to understand. The room went silent. It was a direct challenge, delivered without aggression, but with absolute certainty. Martin Westwood, petty neighborhood tyrant, was being called out publicly by a woman who refused to be intimidated, and judging by the expressions around the room, people were enjoying it. I move we table this enforcement action pending further review, the younger board member said. All in favor? 3 hands went up immediately. A fourth hesitated, then joined them. Martin sat alone in his opposition, his authority crumbling in real time. Motion passes, the board member said. The enforcement action against 412 and 414 Maple Drive is tabled indefinitely, pending compliance review with county ordinances. It was over. Just like that. Months of potential harassment, thousands of dollars in fines, the destruction of a magnificent tree, all defeated in less than an hour by facts, preparation, and community support. Daniel and Lena didn't speak until they were outside the community center, the warm evening air washing over them. Other neighbors stopped to congratulate them, to apologize for not speaking up sooner, to share their own frustrations with Martin's leadership. Through it all, Lena stayed close to Daniel's side, accepting thanks with grace but clearly overwhelmed by the support. When they finally made it back to their properties, standing beneath the oak tree that had started everything, Lena let out a long, shaky breath. I can't believe that worked. Why not? We had the facts, the law, and the moral high ground. In my world, that doesn't always matter. Power matters. Money matters. Facts are negotiable. Not here. Daniel looked up at the oak's spreading branches, dark against the twilight sky. Here, we're just neighbors trying to protect something that matters. And it turns out that matters more than Martin's ego. Lena followed his gaze, and when she spoke again, her voice was soft. Thank you for pushing me to do this together, for not letting me handle it alone. You could have handled it alone. You had everything you needed. Maybe. But it wouldn't have felt like this. She turned to him, and in the dim light, her expression was open in a way Daniel had never seen, vulnerable, genuine. This felt good. Having someone stand with me, not behind me or in front of me, just with me. Yeah, Daniel said. It did. They stood there in the growing darkness, the oak tree above them and their houses on either side, and something passed between them that had nothing to do with HOA violations or property lines. Recognition, maybe. Understanding. The acknowledgement that they'd fought a battle together and won, not just against Martin Westwood, but against their own instincts to face everything alone. I should go, Lena said, but she didn't move. Yeah. Emma's probably wondering where you are. She went to Mia's after school. Won't be home until 8. Oh, Lena bit her lip. Do you want to get actual dinner to celebrate? There's an Italian place downtown that... I'd like that, Daniel said, cutting off her nervous rambling. Let me grab my jacket. As he turned toward his house, Lena caught his hand, just briefly, just long enough to stop him. Daniel, I'm glad you didn't let me pay you for catching me that first day. Why? Because if you had, this would be different. We'd be different, and I like this, whatever this is becoming. Daniel squeezed her hand once before releasing it. So do I. They went to dinner. They talked about everything except trees and HOAs, about Emma and her dreams of becoming a marine biologist, about Lena's work and the merger that was consuming her days, about Daniel's carpentry and the custom furniture he built in his spare time. They talked like people getting to know each other, without walls or pretense, and when Daniel finally dropped Lena back home at 10:30, he realized he'd laughed more in one evening than he had in months. Standing on her doorstep, Lena hesitated. This probably breaks some kind of neighbor code, doesn't it? Dinner and whatever this is? Probably, but we just took down Martin Westwood. I think we can handle a little complicated. She smiled, real and warm and beautiful. Good night, Daniel. Good night, Lena. He waited until she went inside, then walked back to his own house, where Emma was already home and pretending she hadn't been watching from the window. And for the first time since Sarah died, Daniel let himself imagine what it might be like to not be alone. To have someone stand beside him, steady and strong, facing whatever came next. He didn't know it yet, but everything was about to get much more complicated. The victory they'd celebrated tonight had made an enemy of Martin Westwood, and men like him didn't forget public humiliation. Worse, it had made Lena's life, and Daniel's, visible in ways that would attract attention from places far more dangerous than a neighborhood association. But that was tomorrow's problem. Tonight, beneath the ancient oak that had brought them together, Daniel Harper allowed himself something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. The hope lasted exactly 11 days. Daniel was in his workshop on a Saturday afternoon teaching Emma how to properly sand cabinet doors when Lena appeared in his driveway. She wasn't wearing her usual armor, no tailored pants or silk blouses. Instead, she wore jeans and a faded Northwestern sweatshirt, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. But it was her face that stopped Daniel cold. She looked exhausted, hollowed out, like someone who'd been fighting a war and losing. Lena? Daniel set down his sandpaper, already moving toward her. What's wrong? She held out a letter, her hand shaking slightly. The city, they're claiming the tree violates municipal codes now, not HOA, actual city ordinances. They're giving me 30 days to remove it, or they'll do it themselves and bill me for the cost. Emma looked up from her sanding. That's not fair, we already won. We won against the HOA, Lena said, and her voice sounded fragile in a way Daniel had never heard. This is different. This is the city of Madison Park, backed by municipal law. They're saying the tree poses a hazard to public infrastructure, power lines specifically, and needs to be removed for public safety. Daniel took the letter, reading it quickly. The language was official, unambiguous, and clearly designed by someone who knew exactly how to weaponize bureaucracy. Martin. Has to be. He must have friends in city administration. This is his revenge for embarrassing him at the meeting. Lena wrapped her arms around herself, looking smaller than Daniel had ever seen her. I checked. The power lines are nowhere near the tree's branches. This is manufactured, but it doesn't matter. They have municipal authority. So we fight it, same as before. We get documentation. We prove the tree's nowhere near the power lines. Daniel, Lena's voice cracked. I'm tired. I'm so tired of fighting. The Brennan merger is falling apart at work. I've been pulling 18-hour days trying to save it, and now this. I can't. I don't have the energy for another war. Daniel had seen Lena angry, defensive, even vulnerable, but he'd never seen her defeated. It scared him more than he wanted to admit. You're not doing this alone. I'll handle the city. I'll get the documentation. No. The word came out sharp. You can't fix this, Daniel. You want to, I know you do, but you can't. This is what happens when people like Martin get their pride hurt. They escalate, they find new angles, and they don't stop until they win or you break. She pressed her palms to her eyes. I'm breaking. I can feel it. Hey! Daniel moved closer, but Lena stepped back, maintaining distance. Lena, look at me. I can't do this. Can't do what? This, us, whatever we're becoming. She lowered her hands and her eyes were bright with unshed tears. I thought I could have something normal, something good. But everything I touch turns into a battle. The HOA, now the city, my job is imploding, and I'm dragging you into my disaster. You and Emma, you don't deserve that. That's not your decision to make, Daniel said quietly. Yes, it is. It's the only decision that's actually mine. Lena's voice was gaining strength, but it was the wrong kind, the brittle, desperate kind that came before breaking. You have a daughter to think about, a life that was stable before I showed up with my problems. I won't be the person who brings chaos into that. Lena, I need you to leave me alone, Daniel. Please. I need to handle this myself, and I need to do it without feeling like I'm failing you too. Emma had stopped sanding completely, watching with the too aware eyes of a child who'd already learned that adults broke sometimes. Miss Brooks, you're not failing. Emma, go inside, Daniel said, his eyes never leaving Lena. But Dad, inside now. Emma went reluctantly, shooting worried glances over her shoulder. When she was gone, Daniel turned back to Lena, who looked like she might bolt at any second. You're scared, he said. Of course I'm scared. They're going to destroy that tree. I'm going to lose the Brennan merger, and my entire life is falling apart. Why wouldn't I be scared? Not of that. You're scared of this. Of us. Of what it means that you're not alone anymore. Daniel kept his voice gentle, but firm. You're scared because for the first time and maybe ever, you let someone stand beside you, and it felt good. And now you're panicking because you don't know how to reconcile needing help with the person you've built yourself into. You don't know what you're talking about. I know exactly what I'm talking about. I did the same thing after Sarah died. Pushed everyone away, insisted I could handle single fatherhood alone, turned down every offer of help because accepting it felt like admitting I was failing. He took a step closer, and this time Lena didn't retreat. It took me 2 years to figure out that letting people help wasn't weakness. It was the only way to survive. This is different. It's not. You're just better at hiding it. Daniel wanted to reach for her, but kept his hands at his sides, giving her space. But here's what I know, Lena. That tree is worth fighting for. Your home is worth fighting for. And whatever this is between us, it's worth fighting for too. But I can't make you believe that. You have to choose it. Lena's face crumpled, and for a moment Daniel thought she might actually cry. Instead, she straightened her shoulders, rebuilt her walls in real time. I'm going to handle the city situation, alone. And I think it's best if we keep our distance for a while, for both our sakes. You're running. I'm protecting you. I don't need protection. I need you to trust me enough to let me stand with you when things get hard. I can't. The words came out as a whisper. I'm sorry, Daniel. I can't. She left before he could respond, walking back to her house with quick, purposeful steps that didn't quite hide the way her shoulders shook. Daniel stood in his driveway, the city's letter still in his hand, and felt something close to anger mixing with his worry. Not at Lena, at the world that had taught her the only safe way to live was alone. Emma appeared at his elbow, having clearly been watching from the window. She's going to try to handle it by herself, isn't she? Yeah. That's stupid. Emma. It is, Dad. She's sad and scared, and she's pushing away the people who want to help her. That's the definition of stupid. Emma crossed her arms, looking far too much like her mother in that moment. Are you going to let her? Daniel looked at his daughter, then at Lena's house, then down at the letter. No, he said finally. I'm not. Over the next week, Daniel watched Lena retreat into herself. She left for work before dawn and returned after dark, her car the only sign she was home at all. The lights in her office burned until late into the night, and twice Daniel saw her silhouette at the window, standing motionless like she was gathering courage to face another day. He respected her request for distance, mostly, but he also quietly worked on the tree problem because Daniel Harper had meant what he said. Some things were worth fighting for, whether Lena wanted his help or not. He spent his evenings after Emma went to bed researching city codes, photographing the distance between the oak tree and the nearest power lines, documenting everything. He called the city's municipal office and requested the specific ordinance they were citing, then cross-referenced it with county regulations. He measured, documented, and built a case just as thorough as the one they'd presented to the HOA. And then he took it to the city council meeting on Thursday evening, without telling Lena he was going. The council chambers were smaller than the community center, more official, with 5 council members sitting behind a raised desk and a handful of residents scattered in the audience. Daniel signed up to speak during public comment, waded through 20 minutes of discussion about parking meters and municipal budgets, and finally heard his name called. Daniel Harper, regarding the tree removal order at 414 Maple Drive. He stood carrying his folder of documentation. Council members, I'm here to contest the removal order issued for the heritage oak at 414 Maple Drive. The order cites potential hazard to power lines, but I've documented that the nearest power lines are 63 feet from the tree's widest branches, well beyond any reasonable hazard distance. One of the council members, a woman in her 50s with reading glasses perched on her nose, frowned. Mr. Harper, are you the property owner? No, ma'am, I'm the adjacent property owner. The tree sits on the property line between our lots. Then the order doesn't affect your property. With respect, it absolutely affects my property. That tree provides shade, prevents erosion, and supports an ecosystem that benefits both properties. More importantly, it's protected under county heritage ordinances. The city's removal order contradicts existing county law. Another council member, a man Daniel recognized as Charles Webb, Martin Westwood's golf buddy, of course, leaned forward. The city's safety concerns supersede county preservation ordinances, Mr. Harper. If our infrastructure team has identified a hazard, has your infrastructure team actually inspected the tree? Because I have a professional arborist report from 3 weeks ago stating the tree is healthy and poses no hazard. I also have photographs showing the exact distance to the power lines, measurements that contradict your cited concerns. Daniel placed the folder on the speaking podium. This isn't about safety. This is retaliation because the homeowner successfully challenged an HOA code violation, and using city resources for personal vendettas isn't just unethical, it's illegal. The accusation hung in the air. Charles Webb's face reddened, and the other council members exchanged uncomfortable glances. The woman with the reading glasses picked up Daniel's folder, flipping through it. "These are thorough," she said quietly. "I'm a carpenter, ma'am. I measure things for a living. I know the difference between a legitimate hazard and manufactured justification. Mr. Harper, you're making serious accusations, Charles said. I'm stating facts. You issued a removal order based on hazards that don't exist. Either your infrastructure team never actually inspected the property, or someone instructed them to cite hazards regardless of reality. Neither scenario reflects well on this council. The silence that followed was heavy. Daniel could feel his heart pounding, but his voice stayed steady. This wasn't a boardroom or a corporate battlefield. This was his neighborhood, his home, and he'd be damned if he'd let petty politics destroy something beautiful just to soothe someone's wounded ego. I propose we table this order pending independent verification, the woman said. We should send our own inspector to assess the actual distance to power lines before proceeding. That's unnecessary, Charles started. I agree with Council Member Rodriguez, another member interrupted. If there's question about the accuracy of the original assessment, we should verify before taking irreversible action. It took another 10 minutes of discussion, but eventually they voted 4-1, Charles Webb, the only dissent, to suspend the removal order pending independent inspection. It wasn't a complete victory, but it bought time. And time was what Lena needed, even if she didn't know Daniel was buying it for her. He was halfway to his truck when he heard his name called. Turning, he saw Council Member Rodriguez approaching, the folder still in her hand. Mr. Harper, this documentation is impressive. Most residents don't go to this much trouble. Most residents don't have heritage oaks worth protecting. Or neighbors worth protecting them for. She smiled slightly. I recognize political maneuvering when I see it. That removal order had Martin Westwood's fingerprints all over it, even if Charles won't admit it. You did that woman a favor by fighting back. I did my neighbor a favor by telling the truth. Well, the truth was persuasive. She handed back his folder. The inspector will take about a week. Based on what you've shown me, I expect the order will be permanently withdrawn. But between you and me, tell Ms. Brooks to be careful. Men like Martin and Charles don't like losing twice. They'll find another angle. I'll tell her, Daniel said, though he had no idea if Lena would listen. He drove home through the darkness, exhausted but satisfied. Emma was already asleep when he got back, and the house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of wind in the oak tree's branches. Daniel stood at his kitchen window, looking across the yard at Lena's house. Her office light was still on. He pulled out his phone and typed a message. City Council suspended the removal order. Independent inspector coming next week. You're safe for now. He almost sent it. His thumb hovered over the send button for a long moment. Then he deleted the message and put his phone away. Lena had asked for space, for distance. She'd said she needed to handle this alone. And as much as it went against every instinct Daniel had, he needed to respect that choice. But he didn't have to like it. The next morning, Daniel woke to find an envelope under his door. For a wild moment, he thought it might be from Lena, a thank you, an apology, something. But when he opened it, he found a simple note in handwriting he didn't recognize. Mind your own business. This is your only warning. No signature, no return address, just a threat delivered in the quiet darkness of early morning. Daniel showed it to Emma over breakfast, watching her face go tight with worry. Dad, this is serious. You should call the police. And tell them what? Someone left a vague note on my door? They can't do anything with this. But it's a threat. It's intimidation. There's a difference. Daniel tucked the note into his pocket. Someone's trying to scare me off, probably Charles Webb or one of Martin's friends. They want me to back down, stop fighting. You're not going to, are you? Daniel looked at his daughter, smart, brave, so much like her mother it hurt sometimes. What do you think? I think you're going to keep fighting, because that's what you do when something matters. Emma pushed her cereal around her bowl. Mom would have done the same thing. Yeah, she would have. That afternoon, while Daniel was replacing a client's kitchen cabinets, his phone rang. Unknown number. He almost didn't answer, but something made him pick up. Mr. Harper? A woman's voice, professional and distant. This is Amanda Chen from the city's Municipal Inspection Office. I'm calling about the oak tree at 414 Maple Drive. Daniel's chest tightened. That was fast. We prioritize safety concerns. I've completed my inspection, and I wanted to inform you of the results before the official report goes to the council. And? The tree poses no hazard to city infrastructure. The nearest power lines are 64 feet away, well beyond any reasonable concern. Your measurements were accurate, Mr. Harper. I'm recommending the removal order be permanently withdrawn. Relief flooded through him. Thank you. However, I should mention that someone from the city had been here before, recently. There are marks in the grass indicating measurement equipment was set up, but no report was filed. She paused. In my professional opinion, whoever conducted that assessment knew the tree wasn't a hazard. They issued the order anyway. Can you prove that? Not definitively, but I wanted you to be aware. Sometimes knowing the truth isn't enough. You need to understand who's working against you and why. After she hung up, Daniel sat in his truck and stared at Lena's house. The city's removal order would be withdrawn. The tree was safe. Lena's home was safe. And she didn't even know about any of it because she'd pushed him away and he'd respected her walls enough to fight her battle in silence. He should tell her, should walk over there, share the good news, let her know that the threat was over. But something stopped him. Lena had been clear she didn't want his help. She'd built her life on handling things alone, on never owing anyone anything. If Daniel told her what he'd done, it would just be another debt in her mental ledger, another thing she'd try to repay or reject. So he did something that went against every honest instinct he possessed. He said nothing. He let the city send their official notice to Lena directly, let her think she'd somehow dodged a bullet through her own efforts or sheer luck. He protected her the way she'd asked to be protected, by staying away, by letting her believe she was still alone. It was the hardest thing he'd done since Sarah's funeral. That evening, Emma found him in the workshop, staring at a half-finished bookshelf without really seeing it. You told her yet? Told her what? Don't do that, Dad. I know you went to the city council. I heard you on the phone with that inspector. Emma climbed onto the workbench, legs swinging. You saved her tree, and you're not even going to tell her. She asked me not to help. She asked you to leave her alone. That's different. Is it? Yeah. She's scared and she's pushing you away because that's what scared people do. But you're letting her think she's alone when she's not. That's lying. Daniel set down the piece of sandpaper he'd been holding. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just notice more when I'm calling you out. Emma's expression softened. Mom used to say that love isn't about giving people what they ask for. It's about giving them what they actually need, even when they're too scared to want it. Did she now? Well, I'm paraphrasing. She said it fancier, but yeah. Emma hopped down from the workbench. Miss Brooks needs to know she's not alone. And you need to tell her before she does something really stupid, like actually trying to cut down that tree herself to end all the fighting. She wouldn't. Daniel stopped. Would she? Lena, exhausted and overwhelmed, convinced she was protecting him by handling everything alone. Would she sacrifice something she loved just to stop the battle? That would be insane. So was climbing a tree in heels, but she did that too. Emma had a point. Daniel found himself at Lena's door an hour later, his knock echoing in the quiet evening. No answer. He tried again, then noticed her car wasn't in the driveway, working late again probably. Or deliberately avoiding home, avoiding the oak tree and the problems it represented. He left a note tucked in her door. Need to talk. Important. D. But when he checked the next morning, the note was still there, untouched. Lena had stopped coming home. For 3 days, her house sat dark and empty. Daniel watched for her car, for any sign of life, and saw nothing. He texted twice, called once. No response. Emma suggested maybe she'd gone on a business trip, but Lena's mail was piling up in her mailbox, which suggested the departure had been sudden, unplanned. On the 4th day, Daniel broke down and did something he'd never done before. He called Meridian Financial. I'm trying to reach Lena Brooks, he told the receptionist. It's a personal matter regarding her property. Ms. Brooks is currently on leave, came the crisp reply. I can transfer you to her assistant if, on leave. For how long? I'm not at liberty to discuss employee schedules. Would you like me to take a message? Daniel left his number, knowing no one would call back. He stood in his kitchen, staring at the phone, and felt the first real tendrils of fear. Lena had pushed him away, yes. But she wouldn't just disappear. Unless she was so overwhelmed, so convinced that her presence was causing problems, that running felt like the only option. "Dad?" Emma's voice was small from the doorway. "Is Miss Brooks okay?" "I don't know, sweetheart." "She's coming back though, right?" Daniel looked out the window at the oak tree, its branches swaying in the afternoon breeze, and thought about the woman who'd fallen from those branches into his arms. The woman who'd learned to trust him enough to fight beside him, only to retreat the moment things got hard. The woman who'd rather face everything alone than risk letting someone down. "I hope so," he said quietly. "I really hope so." But hope, Daniel was learning, wasn't always enough. Lena came back on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks later, pulling into her driveway in a rental car Daniel didn't recognize. He was trimming hedges in his front yard when he saw her, and the relief that flooded through him was so intense it made his hands shake. She looked thinner, worn down, wearing sunglasses that hid her eyes and carrying a single duffel bag, like she'd been traveling light or traveling fast. Daniel wanted to run over, to demand to know where she'd been, to tell her everything he'd done while she was gone. Instead, he set down his hedge trimmer and waited, giving her space to make the first move. She didn't look at him, just walked into her house and closed the door. Emma came home from school an hour later and immediately noticed Lena's car. "She's back?" "Looks like it." "Are you going over there?" "She knows where I am if she wants to talk." "Dad, that's stupid. You should—" "Emma." Daniel's voice was gentle but firm. "I pushed her away once by trying to help when she didn't want it. I'm not making that mistake again. If Lena wants space, I'll give her space." But giving space didn't mean Daniel stopped watching. He saw her lights come on as evening fell, saw her silhouette moving through her house like a ghost. Around 8 o'clock, a pizza delivery car pulled up, and Daniel felt a small measure of relief. At least she was eating. He was loading the dishwasher after dinner when his doorbell rang. Emma got there first, pulling the door open to reveal Lena standing on their porch. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater, her hair damp from a shower, but she still looked exhausted, fragile. "Miss Brooks." Emma's face lit up. "You're back." "Hi, Emma. Is your dad home?" "Yeah, he's—" "Dad, Miss Brooks is here." Daniel appeared in the hallway, dish towel still in his hands. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Lena said quietly, "Can we talk?" "Emma, homework," Daniel said. "But I want to—" "Now, please." Emma retreated reluctantly, shooting looks over her shoulder as she climbed the stairs. When her door closed, Daniel stepped aside to let Lena in. She walked to his living room but didn't sit, standing instead with her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. "I went to Chicago," she said without preamble. "Stayed with my sister. I hadn't seen her in 3 years, and she has 2 kids I barely know, and I showed up at her door at midnight looking like a disaster." Lena's voice was flat, reciting facts. "She didn't ask questions, just made up the guest room and let me fall apart." Daniel stayed quiet, letting her talk. "I've been handling everything wrong. My whole life probably, but especially this. The tree, the HOA, you, all of it. I thought if I could just control everything, manage all the variables, keep everyone at arm's length, I'd be safe. But I'm not safe, I'm just alone." She finally looked at him, and her eyes were red-rimmed. "I'm so tired of being alone, Daniel." "Then stop pushing away the people who want to stand with you." I know that's what I'm doing, and I know it's self-destructive, and I still can't seem to stop." She sank onto his couch, her energy draining visibly. "My therapist, yes, I have a therapist now, started seeing her in Chicago. She says I have attachment issues stemming from childhood trauma. Apparently my father leaving when I was 8 taught me that people always leave, so I leave first to protect myself." "That makes sense." "It makes sense intellectually. But knowing why I do something doesn't make it easier to stop doing it." Lena rubbed her face. "I came back because I have to face this eventually. The tree situation, my job, my life. And because I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything." "See, that right there. That's part of the problem. You keep saying I don't owe you, but I do. I owe you honesty and respect and the basic decency of not running away when things get hard." She met his eyes. "I'm sorry for pushing you away, for disappearing, for being too scared to let you help when you clearly wanted to." Daniel set down his dish towel and sat in the chair across from her. The city withdrew the removal order 2 weeks ago. The tree is safe. Lena blinked. What? Independent inspector confirmed it's nowhere near the power lines, poses no hazard. The order was politically motivated, and when someone actually checked the facts, it fell apart. He paused. I thought you knew. The city sent you official notification. I haven't checked my mail in 3 weeks. Lena's voice was barely a whisper. It's really safe? The tree? Yeah. She stared at him, something shifting in her expression. How do you know all this? Daniel had a choice. He could lie, let her believe he'd just heard through the neighborhood grapevine, or he could tell her the truth and face whatever came next. He thought about Emma's words, that love meant giving people what they needed, not what they asked for, and made his decision. I went to the city council meeting, presented documentation proving the tree wasn't a hazard. They suspended the order and sent an independent inspector who confirmed what I'd said. He watched her face carefully. You asked me to leave you alone, and I respected that. But I wasn't going to let them destroy that tree because of political bullshit, so I fought for it without telling you. I'm not sorry for that. Lena was very still. You went to the city council. Yes. You built a case, presented evidence, fought for my tree. Our tree. It's on both our property lines. Our tree, she repeated softly. And you did all that while I was gone, while I'd pushed you away and told you I didn't want your help. You said you didn't want help. You never said I had to stand by and watch something beautiful get destroyed. Daniel leaned forward. Here's the thing, Lena. You can push me away personally. You can decide you don't want a relationship or friendship or whatever this is between us. That's your right. But you can't stop me from being a decent human being who fights for things that matter. That tree matters. This neighborhood matters. And yeah, you matter, whether you want to or not. Tears spilled over, running down Lena's cheeks. I don't know how to do this. Do what? Let someone care about me without expecting it to end, without waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize I'm too much work or too damaged or too... Lena. Daniel moved to the couch beside her, close but not touching. You're not too anything. You're just scared, and that's okay. Being scared is human, but you can't let fear make all your decisions. What if I let you in and you leave anyway? What if I trust you and it breaks me? What if you don't, and you spend the rest of your life alone because you were too scared to try? She looked at him, and Daniel saw the war happening behind her eyes. Years of self-protection, battling against the desperate human need for connection, fear fighting hope. He wanted to promise her he'd never leave, never hurt her, never give her reason to regret trusting him. But he'd learned with Sarah's death that some promises couldn't be kept. Life was uncertain, people died, circumstances changed, nothing was guaranteed. All he could offer was truth. I can't promise forever, he said quietly. Sarah and I promised forever, and cancer didn't care. But I can promise today. I can promise that right now, in this moment, I see you and I like what I see. I can promise that I'll show up when I say I will, that I'll be honest even when it's hard, and that I won't bail the first time things get complicated. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and took her hand. I can promise to try. That's all anyone can really promise. Lena stared at their joined hands. What if I'm bad at this? At letting someone in? Then you'll be bad at it, and we'll figure it out together. Daniel squeezed her fingers gently. You don't have to be perfect, Lena. You just have to be willing. She was quiet for a long moment. Then, so softly, he almost missed it. I'm willing. I'm terrified, but I'm willing. That's enough. That's more than enough. They sat there on his couch, hands linked, while the evening deepened outside and Emma's footsteps creaked overhead. It wasn't a grand romantic gesture or a dramatic declaration. It was just two damaged people choosing to be brave enough to try. Finally, Lena wiped her eyes and took a shaky breath. I should probably actually check my mail, see what else I've been avoiding. Probably a good idea. Will you come with me? It was such a small request, but Daniel understood its weight. Lena asking for company, for support, for someone to stand beside her while she faced the things she'd been running from. It was huge. Yeah, he said. I'll come with you. They walked across the yard together, the oak tree's branches rustling above them in the evening breeze. Lena's mailbox was stuffed full, and they carried the pile inside to her kitchen table. Bills, catalogs, junk mail, and buried in the middle, the official notice from the city declaring the removal order permanently withdrawn. Lena read it twice, then set it down carefully. You really did this. Saved my tree while I was falling apart in Chicago. I saved our tree while you were taking care of yourself. There's a difference. Not to me. She looked around her kitchen, pristine, expensive, empty. I bought this house thinking it would make me happy. Big promotion, corner office, success by every measure I was taught to value. But I've been miserable, working 18-hour days to avoid coming home to silence, pushing away neighbors because letting people in felt dangerous. Her gaze drifted to the window, to the oak tree visible in the fading light. That tree is the only thing about this place that ever felt real, and I almost let them take it without fighting because I was too exhausted to care. But you didn't. It's still there. You're still here. That's what matters. Lena turned to face him fully. The Brennan merger fell through, completely collapsed while I was in Chicago. I'll probably get demoted, maybe fired. Everything I've worked for the last 5 years is gone. I'm sorry. I'm not. She said it with surprise, like she was discovering the truth as she spoke it. I'm not sorry. That job was killing me. The hours, the pressure, the constant battles. I thought it was what I wanted, but it was just what I knew. Fighting, winning, proving myself over and over. It's exhausting. So what do you want? I don't know, but I think I want to find out, without the 18-hour days and the constant pressure to be perfect. She smiled slightly. Maybe I'll take up carpentry. Learn to make bookmarks. The world can always use more bookmarks. They sorted through the rest of her mail together, Daniel making coffee while Lena dealt with bills and administrative nonsense. It was domestic and ordinary and somehow more intimate than any conversation they'd had before. This was real life, paperwork and coffee and comfortable silence, and Lena was letting him into it. Emma appeared around 9, pretending she'd just come down for water, but clearly checking on them. Everything okay? Everything's okay, sweetheart, Daniel said. Miss Brooks, you're staying now, right? Not leaving again? Lena looked at Emma, then at Daniel, then back at the young girl who'd witnessed too much of this whole complicated mess. I'm staying, I promise. Good, Emma grabbed her water, because Dad's been really sad without you here, even though he tried to hide it. Emma, it's true. You kept looking at her house all sad and stuff. It was pathetic. She grinned to soften the words. I'm glad you're back, Miss Brooks. You make him less pathetic. She disappeared upstairs before Daniel could respond, leaving him shaking his head. I apologize for my daughter. She has no filter. She's honest. I like that. Lena was smiling properly now, the first real smile Daniel had seen since she'd returned. And for what it's worth, I missed you too. Both of you. Yeah. Yeah. The moment stretched between them, heavy with possibility. Daniel thought about kissing her, about crossing that line from whatever this was to something more defined. But Lena was still fragile, still finding her footing, and he didn't want to push, so he just smiled and said, You want to have dinner with us this week? Nothing fancy. Emma's been practicing her cooking skills and is dying to show off. I'd like that. Thursday work? Thursday's perfect. Lena left around 10, but this time when she walked back to her house, she paused at the oak tree, placing her hand on its rough bark like greeting an old friend. Daniel watched from his porch and felt something settle in his chest. She was staying. She was trying. That was enough. The next morning brought unexpected developments. Daniel was eating breakfast when his phone rang. Council member Rodriguez. Mr. Harper, I wanted to give you advance notice. We're opening an investigation into the tree removal order. Several irregularities in how it was processed, and your documentation helped expose them. Charles Webb has resigned from the council, effective immediately. Daniel nearly dropped his coffee. He resigned? Between you and me, we gave him the option to resign or face a formal ethics investigation. He took the resignation. She paused. Martin Westwood is also stepping down from the HOA, Turns out several residents filed complaints about his behavior, and your public challenge at that meeting gave them courage to speak up. I didn't mean to start a revolution. Sometimes revolutions start because one person says enough is enough. You stood up for what was right, Mr. Harper. Other people noticed. Rodriguez's voice warmed. Your neighbor is lucky to have you. After she hung up, Daniel sat staring at his phone. Martin and Charles both gone. Their petty tyranny ended because he'd refused to back down. It should have felt like victory. Instead, it just felt like common sense had finally prevailed. He told Lena that evening when she came over for dinner. Emma had made lasagna, slightly burnt on the edges but edible, and they ate at Daniel's kitchen table like a makeshift family. When he shared the news about Martin and Charles, Lena went very still. They're gone? Both of them? Both of them. Because you fought back. Because enough people fought back. I just started it. Lena set down her fork. I spent my whole career fighting battles alone because I thought that's what strength meant. But you fought for me, for us, without expecting anything in return. You made it safe for other people to stand up too. That's real strength. I just did what needed doing. No, you did what most people are too scared to do. You stood up to bullies and you won. She reached across the table and took his hand right there in front of Emma, who grinned into her lasagna. Thank you for all of it, for catching me when I fell, for fighting for the tree, for not giving up on me when I gave up on myself. You didn't give up. You just needed time to remember who you are. And who am I? Someone strong enough to ask for help. That's the hardest kind of strong there is. Emma made gagging noises. You guys are being really sappy. Can we eat dessert now? They ate ice cream and talked about normal things, Emma's science project, Lena's plans to update her resume, Daniel's upcoming furniture commission. It was ordinary and comfortable and exactly what all of them needed. When Lena finally left around 8:30, Emma hugged her at the door, fierce and quick. I'm really glad you came back, Emma said. Me too, kiddo. Daniel walked Lena to her door, the night air cool and fresh. You okay? Really okay? I'm getting there. Therapy helps. So does knowing I don't have to handle everything alone. She turned to face him. I'm going to be bad at this sometimes. At letting you in, at trusting that you won't leave. I'm going to panic and pull away and probably drive you crazy. Probably. And you're okay with that? I'm okay with you, all of you. The parts that are easy and the parts that are hard. Daniel tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We'll figure it out as we go. I'm not ready yet for more than this. I need time. Then take time. I'm not going anywhere. She kissed his cheek, soft and brief, then disappeared into her house. Daniel stood on her porch for a moment, touching the spot where her lips had been, and smiled. The neighborhood festival happened 3 weeks later, a tradition Daniel usually avoided, but Emma insisted they attend this year. It was held in the park 2 blocks away with food trucks and craft booths and a live band playing covers of 70s rock. The entire neighborhood turned out, including faces Daniel hadn't seen in months. He was helping Emma at the face painting booth when he saw Lena arrive. She wore a sundress, her hair down and loose, looking more relaxed than Daniel had ever seen her. She caught his eye across the crowd and smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. Go, Emma said, wielding her face paintbrush. I've got this handled. You sure? Dad, I'm 12, not 5. Go talk to your girlfriend. She's not my... yet. Now go. Daniel walked over to where Lena stood admiring handmade pottery at one of the craft booths. Hey yourself, Emma's got quite the line going. She's discovered she can charge $5 per butterfly. Kid's going to be rich by the end of the day. They walked through the festival together, stopping at various booths, running into neighbors who wanted to thank Daniel for standing up to Martin, or congratulate Lena on keeping her tree. It felt normal, natural, like they'd been doing this for years instead of weeks. They ended up near the small stage where the band was playing, watching couples dance on the grass. Lena stood close enough that her shoulder brushed Daniel's arm. This is nice, she said quietly. Being part of something. Belonging somewhere. You always belonged here. You just had to let yourself believe it. I've been thinking about what I want to do, career-wise. She turned to face him. I've got enough saved that I don't have to rush into another corporate job. I thought maybe I'd start consulting, set my own hours, choose my own clients, have time for things that matter. That sounds good. It sounds terrifying, but good. She paused. I also thought maybe I'd learn to cook. Emma mentioned you eat cereal for dinner too often. Emma talks too much. Emma's right, though. You need better nutrition. Are you offering to cook for me, Lena Brooks? I'm offering to learn to cook with you. There's a difference. She smiled. I'm trying this new thing where I do things with people instead of for them or at them. It's very revolutionary. Daniel laughed. How's that working out? Ask me in 6 months. The band shifted into a slower song, and couples on the grass pulled each other close. Daniel held out his hand. Dance with me. Lena looked at his hand, then at the crowd of neighbors who would definitely notice and talk, then back at his face. For a moment, Daniel thought she might refuse, might retreat into her old habits of keeping everything private and controlled. Then she took his hand. Okay. They moved to the grass where other couples swayed, and Daniel pulled Lena into his arms carefully, giving her space to pull away if she wanted. She didn't. She stepped closer, resting her head against his shoulder, and they danced slowly while the sun set behind the trees and the neighborhood watched. Everyone's staring, Lena murmured. Let them. This is going to be all over the neighborhood by tomorrow. Probably. And you're okay with that? Daniel pulled back enough to see her face. I'm standing in the middle of a festival, dancing with an incredible woman who finally stopped pushing me away. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Lena's eyes were bright. When did you become such a romantic? I've always been a romantic, you just never noticed. I notice now. The song ended, but they didn't immediately separate. They stood there on the grass, surrounded by neighbors and noise and life, and something passed between them that didn't need words. An understanding, a promise, a choice to keep choosing each other, even when it was scary, even when it was hard. Emma appeared at Daniel's elbow, her face decorated with her own butterfly design. Mrs. Patterson wants to know if you'll help move the tables after the festival. I told her you would because you're annoyingly helpful. Thanks, Em. Also, can Miss Brooks come over for pancakes tomorrow? I want to show her my marine biology presentation. Lena laughed. I'd love to see your presentation, and I make decent pancakes if you want help. Dad's pancakes are terrible. Yours can't be worse. They stayed at the festival until dark, helping with cleanup and chatting with neighbors who felt less like strangers now and more like community. When they finally walked back toward their houses, Emma ran ahead, leaving Daniel and Lena alone under the oak tree. This is where it started, Lena said, looking up at the branches. Me, stuck and scared, and too proud to admit I needed help. And me, standing here promising to catch you. You did catch me. In more ways than one. She turned to face him. I'm not good at this yet, at being vulnerable, at letting someone matter, but I'm trying. That's all I ask. I have one more thing to try. Lena reached into her purse and pulled out a small box. I made something. Well, I commissioned something, but I helped design it. Daniel opened the box to find 2 matching bracelets, simple leather bands with small metal plates. On one plate was engraved, "Not everything costs money." On the other, "Some things are priceless." I thought, Lena looked nervous. I thought we could each wear one, as a reminder of where we started and where we're going. Daniel slipped one bracelet onto his wrist, then took the other and fastened it around Lena's. Perfect fit. Yeah? Yeah. They stood under the oak tree that had brought them together, wearing matching bracelets that told their story better than words could. And when Daniel finally kissed her, soft and careful and full of promise, Lena didn't pull away. She kissed him back, standing on her toes to reach him better, her hands fisting in his shirt like she was afraid of falling. But she wasn't falling. Not anymore. She was exactly where she was supposed to be, rooted, steady, and finally brave enough to trust that sometimes when you let go, someone catches you. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, they hold on. Emma's voice drifted from Daniel's porch. Finally, I was beginning to think you two would never figure it out. They broke apart, laughing, and Lena called back, "Shouldn't you be in bed? Shouldn't you be kissing my dad instead of talking to me?" Daniel shook his head. "I'm so sorry about her." "Don't be. She's right." Lena smiled up at him. We should probably get back to that. So they did, standing beneath the oak tree while Emma cheered from the porch and the neighborhood lights winked on one by one. Two people who'd learned the hard way that strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about being brave enough to stand together. And somewhere in the branches above them, the oak tree that had witnessed it all swayed gently in the evening breeze, its roots running deep beneath their homes, connecting them in ways that had nothing to do with property lines and everything to do with choice. The choice to trust, the choice to try, the choice to let someone catch you when you fall, and to catch them right back when they need it. It wasn't a perfect ending, because real life never gave those. There would be hard days ahead, moments of doubt, old habits that died hard. But they'd face them together, under the oak tree that had started everything, in the neighborhood that had become home. And that was more than enough. That was everything.